Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalatu wassalamu ala Muhammadin wa alihi tayyibin tahirin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilman. So, assalamu alaikum everyone. Our topic for this season of Ramadan reflections is the Quranic guide to mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And to understand what brings us well being as human beings, what brings us peace and happiness, which we seek for, we must first understand our human nature as created by Allah. And only then we can grasp what we need in order to cultivate well being. So in Surah Ar-Rum, chapter 30, verse 30 of the Holy Quran, Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَأَقِمْ وَجْهِكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها لا تبديل لخلق الله ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. So direct your face towards the religion, being devout and inclining to truth, being Hanif, the natural disposition of Fitrah upon which Allah has created all people. There is no altering the creation of Allah. That is the upright religion, but most people do not know. So there are two key words in this verse which require some reflection. The first is Hanif. And being, the English translation says either being devout or inclining to truth. Hanif is the one, refers to one who turns away from misguidance and inclines towards the belief in the oneness of God. The second word that we need some reflection on is the nature, predisposition, primordial nature of mankind, which is called Fitrah. The Fitrah is the innate nature upon which human beings are created. We can think of this as the divine operating system programmed into our souls, into our hard drive. It is the inner compass that inclines us towards truth, justice, and beauty. It is the moral code and goodness with which we are born, all human beings. Allah doesn't say Muslims, Mormons, He says the human beings are created such. So in other words, as human beings, we are created with a particular nature, Fitrah, which naturally inclines towards and yearns for truth, justice, peace, and beauty. So given that Allah is the source of all truth, justice, peace, and beauty, our fitrah is to recognize the oneness of God, His perfection, and to actualize this truth in our lives. Now, what this verse teaches us also is that true religion does not contradict our fitrah. Rather, it reinforces it and gives form to it. So, Allah has, beautifully attributed this fitrah to Himself. In other words, He has created it. He has molded us upon a design that naturally inclines towards human decency and righteousness. So, our innate desire for justice, truth, beauty is not a human construct. It is divinely embedded in us. There are so many, there's so much research which shows that even young children, they instinctively recognize what is fair, what is beautiful, what is kind. And this shared fitrah, it transcends race, it transcends nationality, gender, and economic background. And it unites humanity in a common yearning, our intrinsic pull towards Allah, the source of all goodness and perfection. When people fail to recognize this innate connection, this is when we experience inner turmoil. Why? Because we are going against our creational design. We are created to yearn for this and to want it. And when we ignore this part of us, obviously we struggle to find peace. There's a well-known Hadith Qudsi which says, Verily I created my servants as hunafa, naturally inclined to faith. Then the Satans came to them and distracted them from their religion. So our hearts seek connection with something greater, something internal. And when we ignore this innate longing, we may feel restless, fulfilled, or lost. So, this is why even when we have achieved worldly success, when, by all measures, when we have made it, we may often feel incomplete, and we may feel an emptiness even when we're surrounded by people and things. Because true fulfillment comes from nourishing the soul with what it naturally craves, which is closeness to Allah. And so, strengthening our relationship with Him is not merely about just doing the rituals, it is actually about aligning with the very essence of our fitrah. And the verse ends by saying, most people do not know. Why? Because we as human beings are distracted and we're not in touch with our true nature very often. Because it requires attention, reflection, and inner work. Why? Because there is so much external noise in this environment, in so much external noise and distraction, which are perfectly designed actually to keep us unaware. Especially in the days of social media, in the days when we have so much opportunity to while away our time in meaningless things, right? And this is, if you just check in with yourself, I know when I've had a session on doom scrolling on Instagram, at the end of it, when I finally manage to force myself to close those tabs, it leaves me with a real empty feeling, because I have this feeling of having wasted time, of not having anything for it, and not really needing, we do it often because we crave connection, right? This is, many people will do it to combat loneliness, to combat sadness. But here's the thing, those things tend to make it worse, because we're just adding to the loneliness by moving further away from what our soul naturally craves. So let's, keep this in mind. Let's remind ourselves that we are naturally created to be in touch with the One, naturally created to incline towards Tawheed. And it's by nurturing our soul with that closeness, and of course we will discuss how we can get there, but it is by nurturing that closeness on a regular basis that we can find that inner peace and taste fulfillment on a daily basis, inshallah.